Skills alone, it doesn't create an understanding. Where stories, it gives context, purpose, emotional connection.
Kids love stories. When kids get told a story, their imagination opens. They sit down, they feel entrenched in it. Welcome back to the first 7 years, brought to you by Footy Nippers. This is the show where we unpack movement, culture, coaching and confidence through the lens of early childhood. I'm Jimmy Farquhar, one of the co-founders of Footy Nippers.
And I'm Troy Nathan, one of the co-founders of Footy Nippers.
Today, we're exploring how culture and storytelling shape the way kids learn and grow. And I want to start this part off quite interesting that you look around and all the generations we've gone through, whether it's been the internet revolution, the increase of iPads, devices, but one thing still always reigns true. Kids love stories. When kids get told a story, their imagination opens. They sit down, they feel entrenched in it. And as an example, I've held up one of the most popular books here in New Zealand. So this is a book here that most kids have seen. And this book here is The Little Yellow Digger, sold over 500,000 copies. And why does it stand the test of time? Because kids are drawn to it. And I think this is a really interesting thing to talk about, of how the culture meets the story. It's what we're going to dive into today. Right. So in terms of where we want to start, look, it goes without saying, but stories are sticky. They create meaning. They create emotional connection. And as a kid growing up, Troy, how did you engage with stories through your upbringing?
Both stories were the most powerful thing growing up, because I'd seen myself, I visualized it, and storytelling was massive, not just at home before we were going to bed and mum or dad or grandparents would come in and read a story, but we learned a lot of stories when we were at school. After lunch, what I noticed as well, which was a big thing, is that we run around during lunchtime playing with our mates, but we always had storytelling after lunchtime. And from then I always knew it was a way for us to reconnect back to who we are. We found a belonging, we found identity. Our emotions were drawn into that particular story. It's one of those things. I've got kids of my own. I try and read them stories as much as they can and get a real good buzz of them being immersed into what it's about.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's exactly right. It just brings back memories for me as a kid. I remember my pop, Vince, who's sadly passed away 15, 20 years ago. But every time I'd go stay with him, I remember he'd tell me these stories, but he would make them up in his head, which is really cool because his imagination would be working and so would mine. And obviously this is me as a very young kid, but one of the big insights we've had, and we know through growing up, kids engage with stories on another level. So when we were going through the process of Footy Nippers, we really engaged with early childcare teachers and parents of that age group. And we found that insight to be that the stories connect very deeply with kids. Why do you think they connect deeply? What's the unique part about them?
Because they immerse themselves in that particular story. They, like I said earlier, there's an identity that they feel inside the story, the emotion, and there's meaning behind it. But the memory retention improves dramatically when you listen to stories. There's studies out there that stories that are delivered, okay, they're times 20. They remember it more than actual facts. So when you're going through storytelling, they'll always remember what's been told. And, the psychology shows is that children internalize identity through a narrative, So when, for example, if we're doing a Footy Nippers session, if they were riding the waves, and more than just doing particular drills, because they embody the role of riding the wave.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just makes a lot of sense, especially with that age group, and I think I've spoken about it before, but there's such a shift at the moment between not getting kids to do drills when they turn up to rugby training or football training, whatever it might be, but get them to do games. But then the insight is that the lower down the age group you get, just doing games isn't necessarily going to be the most effective method, which is why this imagination and immersive part is so important. But it gets us on to kind of the next point of it, which is like, how does storytelling help teach values before skills?
Well, skills alone, it doesn't create an understanding, where stories, it gives context, purpose, emotional connection. So an example could be, in our sessions will be like the Taniwha, the river, or the forest and the animals, or the ocean journey. The skills actually appear inside that journey. So there's a behavioral shift from it, where kids go from completing tasks to actually living the experience. So storytelling, it's massive in terms of what we're trying to do with Footy Nippers. The beauty about the Māori story as well is that it gives a lot of values inside the story, so it could be courage, respect, helping others. So there's like a natural direction inside that story for the child that's attending the course or the class.
Yes, so what you're saying is it's not just about imagination. It's actually you're teaching, it's not physical skills they're learning from the class, but they're learning other skills that are integral to growing strong, kind, confident kids.
Yeah, definitely, mate. So through the storytelling, it teaches the heart of the lesson rather than just the technique, So like kids, they'll never remember drills, but they'll always remember a story.
And a drill is not engaging for kids of this age as well. And we know that through our experience. You know that through Haka. The moment that you're getting them to do drills and they're waiting, you've lost them. And like, look at the attention spans of young kids now. I know we don't want them on technology and phones, but they scroll content 4 or 5 seconds. They've been brought up in a world where if this doesn't engage me straight away, I'm done. And the same thing applies to when you're trying to teach new skills and introduce them to movement. If you're not engaging them on their level and sparking their imagination, then you're going to lose them as well. So yeah, the story is crucial.
How many drills could you remember back in your day when you were doing sport? Or how many stories can you remember back at school? Or what are the stories that your mom and dad told you? So like these things always come back to you because you had immersed yourself. You felt like you're in that story the whole time. So that's a proven fact, right? That they do remember the stories rather than the drills.
I don't remember a single drill, especially if we're talking about that age group. I know that I loved going to playing sport and going to training, but I knew that the moment that obviously it might have been game-based or the moment that, whether it was moving or not, my grandfather told me these stories or sat down. They've stood the test of time, haven't they? So, yeah, I think it's insight like that helps us understand how we need to deliver movement in a fun and great experience. And obviously through the use of stories, that's where we get to. And someone might sit there and say like, okay, well, you just create a story and get them to move. Well, now it's probably important for us to really dive a bit into your heritage and your upbringing, Troy. And look, I've had the same upbringing being a Kiwi, but more so around like, how does the Māori culture, the Māori storytelling influence the way you teach young kids? And maybe through Haka. Give us an example with Haka and then how it's going to influence onto Footy Nippers as well.
The thing with like the Haka and stuff or those sort of teachings, it automatically connects with like a belonging, right? So the Māori storytelling changes the way that I teach because obviously it shifts the learning, the learnings from instructions to identity. So there's a lot of meaning behind their activity. Instead of just teaching a skill, with Footy Nippers, we'll introduce the story first. Okay, so first of all, you'll have the character. So our theming aligns with the Māori gods. So you might have Tane Mahuta, which is the god of the forest, or you might have Tangaroa, which is the god of the ocean. So once you have that, and then obviously you want to try and create an environment, right? So it could be the taniwha in the river, or the animals in the forest, or the journey across the ocean. Then you may layer the movement after that. Okay, so when the kids step inside that story, the movement and games or the drills, so to speak, suddenly they have a purpose. What we have found, especially in the pilot session, is that the children had connected a lot more faster, okay, and they felt like they're a part of something, so automatically first of all, they felt included, they felt connected, and they're part of something bigger. So that journey was, togetherness and what they want to try and achieve. And the beauty about the Māori storytelling, like I said before, it carries a lot of values. So, courage, respect, like helping each other, so these are more purposeful values that are automatic in the stories through that session as well.
One word that really comes to me is belief. So belief that they can do something. Like if a kid lacks that belief or the confidence, they're never going to try. So the way that we need to get them thinking that I can do something is what we believe. And we know from all the research that it's through that storytelling. Now, when I think about Māori storytelling, that they were the staple stories that would get told at school. And I know I bring it up all the time, but Maui and the Sun is definitely the most popular one that we know. Again, I know every single person that I know in my age group doesn't forget that story in particular. Yeah, I mean, when you dive deeper into articulating the movement problem and how we solve it, that the story part it's about the immersion, and it's about knowing that if I go to this Footy Nippers session, it's not just a sports class. It's not just something that I could do at school, but I'm stepping into this adventure and this world where I'm going to be helping Maui capture that sun. And that's
Yeah.
where I love the Māori culture. I think that the stories and the gods and the purpose behind why we're doing it, it's not just tell the story and off you go. It's teach them the values, give them the belief, instill them with the confidence. Because as we say, if confidence isn't found early, it can be lost. And that's what we
Yeah.
need to solve.
100%. Like a couple of, if I could share possibly, like, so in the curriculum, the river isn't just a game. You know, it represents flow and teamwork. The taniwha isn't just for fun. That represents courage. You know, the forest isn't about imagination. It represents belonging. You know, so these are the key values that we're trying to incorporate, not just coaching skills. You know, so when kids feel part of the story, that's when the learning sticks.
Yeah, cool. Is it like, what sort of, why is belonging so important in early childhood environments, you reckon?
Right, belonging is the foundation of everything that happens, bro, with early childhood. It's before kids learn a skill or build confidence, they need to feel like they're in a safe space. You know, they accept the environment, because when a child feels like they belong somewhere, that's when their guard drops. When the guard drops, they're willing to try things, they express themselves, they know how to make mistakes, and they don't worry about it. And the most importantly, that's when they start feeling connected to other kids. When a child feels like they're an outsider, as an outsider, that's when their guards, you know, up, and that's when they hold back. They don't express themselves. So, you know, when a child feels like this is my place, that's when everything changes.
Yeah, completely agree. And like I said, I've seen it firsthand, what you do at Haka and how you, I mean, a lot of, well, like with anything, even if you went to a social event as an adult, you know, I'm definitely someone who likes talking to people and I'm got more the sales mindset, but I still, even if I walked into an environment where there's lots of people there, I'm gonna be like, oh, you know, they're kind of, oh, it's a little bit of nerves. And imagine how the kids feel. You know, they've never been in a situation or experienced something like that before. So how do you make them feel like they belong from the moment they walk in? And I've seen you guys, you give every kid you get to their level, you give them the Haka handshake, you get them excited, you make them feel like they belong and they're comfortable. And then that is the first step. And it's just a nice pat on the back, right, to get them to that level. And once they get to
Mm.
that level and they're on the field, then it's like, right, how do we then instill the confidence to get them to do the activity? So you've got certain ways and cues that I've seen you do that with Haka, and they're the same cues that we're going to be employing for Footy Nippers. So, you know, even with those pilot sessions when the kids came out, you can see on that video you're down at their level, the unique high fives, you know, you're immersing them in that story. So I can just see how that transition has happened from you focusing on those more the 7 to 16, and how you know that some of those things are going to work at that younger age group as well.
Yeah, but in their own time and space, you know, that's when they'll come around. But if we can implement things that they can feel a little bit more comfortable a little bit earlier, we'll be there to try and achieve that, you know. And it's normal, you know, like kids, for example, in the pilot session, in the first session, all their guards are up, right? But at the end of the session, they're giving us cuddles and saying, "Yeah, see you later. We'll see you next week." And that for us, it's makes our heart nice and warm. You know, we're doing a good job there.
The story, because you did 2 different adventures. So for people that don't understand, we run chapters. So chapters are run over 4 weeks, and that's the theme. And then within the theme, we have our adventures, which are 4 adventures over the 4 weeks. So the adventure you did on the second week, did the kids turn up knowing that it was going to be a new adventure? How was that feeling around, I'm coming here to be part of this story, this amazing thing?
Yeah, they sort of knew that the story was going to be there the second week, a different story or a different adventure, because we had got so basically it was adventure 14 that we had done first pilot, and then we did adventure like 24. They knew what Tiki was about, right? So Tiki was our guardian angel on the floor, and
Just
when
here.
we had Tiki. So he's our guardian angel that leads all the kids on their journey. When all the kids knew they're in a circle around him, that's when that was our safe space. That's when we told our stories. So they sort of knew that story was going to come. That second week, when they knew the story was coming, it was pretty cool. Just looking back at the videos, bro, is that when I told the story, kids would copy my actions. They'll mortify straight away, you
Yeah,
know?
when you're putting your
So
hands up and doing things like that.
yeah, and then one of them was like, it was so that second pilot session was right in the waves. So like Tongaroa, the God Ocean, he just wants everyone to know that we have to respect the power of the waves and what's in the ocean. So that one there is about the waves, you know. So what do you do when a small wave comes when you're at the beach? We jump, you know. So then straight away when you ask them, because they immerse themselves inside the story, the way to respect it. If there's a small wave, we can jump over it. You know, if there's a big wave, we have to duck. If the wave was too big, okay, we felt the the power of that wave, that's when we run back. And then just going back to your first question, rather than teaching agility drills, they immerse themselves in that story and they become it and they do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the fact that it's entwined in culture, Māori culture, that is the story. It's so powerful, right? And when we articulated the problems we found, which Footy Nippers is solving a problem, which is teaching kids more foundational skills, getting them to love movement early on because there's too much sitting time, too much screen time. One of the things we saw is there's a lack of holistic cultural programs out there, also about learning, right? When you come here and see the story, you're also learning about a culture. So I just think there's so much special learnings in that as well. Kids will carry that. They won't forget that. So yeah, it's a very cool offering in that regard.
Yeah, definitely culturally enriched, but they have that, that emotional safety there as well, right? So when they have that emotional safety, that's when they have that sense of belonging. That's when the learnings are infinity.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, well, I think it's been awesome to unpack this topic. And one of the thing that comes to fruition is the thing that makes you unique in any business. And for us, we're trying to help so many people in the realm, being a parent, kids, coaches, franchisee owners, but we know that you've got to do things differently and unique to engage this audience. So the way that you've worked with the curriculum and the way you've brought the Māori stories into it, I think is just truly unique. And the pilot sessions showed that. So yeah, from my side, it's really exciting to see it come to life through the pilots. And we know the power of a story. We will keep pushing to deliver that immersion at every session we do. And, we're not going to give away all the secrets now, but we've got some very cool ideas how that experience will be delivered when it's at the session, when it's not at the session, and also through things like this as well. So Troy, I loved speaking with you again. A cool topic. But yeah, is there anything else you want to add to the audience?
Well, I was just thinking back, the last time I did a podcast was more than a month ago. And
Correct.
just for all the people that are listening out there, our brother Jimmy had a baby boy. Let's go. Auntie Abby did well. So we just want to congratulate you, bro.
Thank you very much, bro.
What you guys have delivered. And obviously the amazing mahi you've been doing the last month while trying to juggle a newborn. How was your experience the last month, brother?
Yeah, so the last month has been hard, I'll be honest. It's such a special time, but you're not really prepared for what happens. Like, this baby lives and dies by how you manage it and feed it. So his name's Bo, and it's been the most incredible journey with not much sleep. So yeah, I think I'll be better prepared for number 2, but loving the experience, and we've got a wee footy nipper on the way. So how good is that?
Yeah, that's cool. Amazing.
Awesome, bro. Thanks for that. And yeah, super stoked to get onto the next podcast, and appreciate all the mahi you're doing.
Yeah, we look forward to it. Thank you to everyone
next
that was
time.
listening. Join the journey, and obviously we'll jump on next week and I'd probably answer a few questions, obviously, that we received about a month ago, but we're on the good journey at the moment. We have obviously a few founder franchisees that we'll set up. We have Dublin that we're announcing this week. The podcast will be out there next week. So we're excited to get that going and just offering more of the experience. Obviously for us as well, it's all learning. So we're loving the journey.
Cool. Until next time. Thanks, Troy.
Cheers, Joey.
See ya. Bye.